Alright, y'all, this is the Movie Commentary Podcast with Nick Everett, the podcast in which we talk about movies, watch movies, and talk about them, either, in some sort of fashion or whatnot. Thank y'all for watching, tuning in today, and this it might be a bit of a shorter episode. I'm not going to be, it's going to be a little different. I'm not going to be watching one feature-length movie. I'm going to be watching a whole bunch of shorter length movies. And the movies I'll be watching today will be they're actually the first, I believe, 5 or so Pixar animated short films. For those of you that have either don't know or just not very well versed on movies, obviously I don't know why you'd be listening to this if you didn't know who Pixar was, but the Pixar Animation Studios is currently owned obviously by Disney, and they make the famous Disney Pixar movies, movies such as Toy Story, Monsters Incorporated, Cars, Ratatouille, Wally, Inside Out. I mean, they made all these great movies, and at least in my opinion, they're the leading animation studio going around today. I mean, you get some people that have said they may have kind of dipped in quality in later years, but I'm still enjoying what they're releasing out today, even with what they did with Onward just recently here. I still found that movie very enjoyable. I will be doing a whole bunch of Pixar movies. Again, I've grown up watching lots of Pixar movies. So Toy Story is the first feature-length computer animated movie, and it's still today literally in my top 3 of my all-time favorite movies of all time. That is redundant there. Blah blah blah. But I'm actually going to be watching the movies that they made before they ever made Toy Story. I mean, Pixar. So a little bit of background information: Pixar Animation Studios actually kind of started off as a kind of a little side project at Lucasfilm, the famous production company that was best known for the Star Wars movies, hence the name Lucasfilm, created by George Lucas. And they also had a hand in producing the Indiana Jones movies as well. But the Lucasfilm, it started off as, and the first, I'm actually watching the title card of the first movie here before I kind of play it. It's the Lucasfilm Computer Graphics Project, and it's basically it was a side project at Lucasfilm to help improve computer animation and computer graphics in movies. It was kind of in the very late 70s, early 80s. I think it was actually right in the middle of when, this movie was made, I believe, in 84, which was a year after Return of the Jedi was released, the last of the original Star Wars. But it is basically a division of Lucasfilm that was all about, just improving computer graphics and just, how they were used in film. But one of the things that, not only for what we know Pixar nowadays is, just full-on computer animation, but they were doing a lot of, they were working with another George Lucas founded company, ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, who are the absolute titans of special effects and movies nowadays. Basically since they made Star Wars. But they were this computer graphics division at Lucasfilm, before they became Pixar, they were working with ILM to create these groundbreaking computer special effects. For those of you that are well versed in movies, probably the best known version is the Genesis effect in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, in which Admiral Kirk and Spock and Dr. McCoy are watching the kind of the Genesis project, and they're showing the Genesis device kind of hitting the planet, and kind of you've seen all this stuff spreading across the planet and creating a new just a new completely different world. But that was using computer graphics, and actually the computer graphics division at Lucasfilm actually helped with that. And they also, I believe, I believe it was Young Sherlock Holmes, the movie that it was, and there was a, not as famous, I haven't even seen that movie, but there was a stained glass window that they were very very key in help creating. Which so they were creating a lot of groundbreaking special effects. However, they also were really in the trying to also get into the business of computer animation. And one of the things like that they did in this early days is that and that they wanted actually one of the leaders of this group was a man by the name of Ed Catmull, who I believe had gotten a PhD in computer graphics or like computer sciences, and they were trying to develop all this technology and to further computer animation, because obviously, as you know, back in the 70s and early 80s, when they were actually making these movies, I mean, computing power was very slow. I mean, they'd have like computers that were basically the size of gymnasiums. It's your local high schools and whatnot. And honestly, those computers had not even probably a fraction of the computing power you have in your iPhone or whatever you're even listening this thing on. But Ed Catmull, his goal was to create the first ever computer animated feature length film. The problem with that is that Ed Catmull and basically almost everybody else that was working at this Lucasfilm graphics project, they didn't know how to animate. When I mean in terms of animate, I mean the best terms I could think of were like they wanted to create like a Disney style film. However, none of them knew how to animate like the Disney style animators. But that's when they brought in a man named John Lasseter to help kind of with the animation side and kind of helping create these create literally like drawings or in this case like computer images, kind of bring them to life. And so in 1984 they released their first under the title of the Lucasfilm Computer Graphics Project. This is their only short film that they actually made, and it is called The Adventures of Andre and Wally B. And I will play it for you right now. Oh, I actually exited out of that. My bad. And here we go. We are starting now. But basically, The Adventures of Andre and Wally B. It's basically it's literally like a 2-hour blip of just kind of computer animation. And basically, what it is it's this I don't even know what to describe him. I don't know if he's a guy or he was like a human, but it's just like this humanoid looking creature named Andre, and he's basically sleeping in a forest somewhere. And then there's this bumblebee named Wally B that comes up and he kind of scares Andre, and then Andre basically runs away, and then Wally B comes up and basically stings him on the tuchus. The heck? But basically the thing with there's a couple things here in Andre and Wally B, at least, and when watching a lot of documentaries about kind of the early days of Pixar and how they were computer animation. This was extremely even for the time, I mean, this was extremely groundbreaking in terms of computer animation. A couple things here. You see it right here when Andre kind of turns and runs away. They add in motion blur, which apparently was a very hard thing to do for computers back in the day. And also one of the things that you really see was Andre and Wally B are very kind of like flexible characters. They kind of have these, like, you see Wally B, he has like these kind of like water balloon like sack filled like legs, and that's kind of basically the same shape as Andre's. No, Wally B is the bee that has the legs like that, and then Andre's kind of body is like kind of shaped like like that. And what they did was they actually created something called the teardrop, which was like a computer animation. It's basically like a model in the computer, which is basically is that they would fill in. They would have literally two semicircles or two hemispheres of a circle, of a sphere, and then basically in the middle, like the computer would kind of fill in like a space, and they would basically use it to like bend and they would be able to like bend and be like really pliable and whatnot, which for the time was very when people saw this, it was released back in 1984. They were blown away with, how fluid these characters would move, because back in the day, computer animation, it was all very stiff. They had to use like very geometric shapes, and nothing that could really kind of bend or move like it did in this movie. Because even if you look at the other shapes that make up Andre and Wally, it's basically they're basically just circles and cones and very basic geometric shapes. Nothing that crazy and whatnot. Actually, one of the things that John Lasseter said is when he was designing the film, he actually was trying to he took inspiration from how they had drawn Mickey Mouse, how simple the Mickey Mouse drawings were back in about 1927 or 1920, when the mid to late 20s, when they were first creating those movies. And he said they basically were just drawing simple geometric shapes. And honestly, if you look at Andre in the movie here, it's he looks a lot like Mickey Mouse. Honestly, if you put the ears on him and put like a little bit of it, put a little nose on him and put the Mickey Mouse like suit on him, he basically would look like that. But again, Andre and Wally, that's only about a 2-minute movie. And then afterwards, what they decided to do was what ended up happening was that the Lucasfilm computer division actually was kind of what they were called spun off. They were bought out by Steve Jobs, and the Steve Jobs, if I can learn how to talk here, that founded Apple. That created the app. I'm not going to say created the Apple computer, but was one of the founders and CEOs of Apple Computer. I believe this was after he had either he had left or gotten kicked out of Apple. That he had bought Lucasfilm. Bought the Lucasfilm computer division, and they decided to spin it off, and they created their own company called Pixar, and they named it after what was called the Pixar imaging computer, which was this very big box of a computer that was actually, it was designed for computer animated imaging, but what it was mostly used for, this specific Pixar imaging computer was actually used for like things like they were trying to model anatomy, like they'd model the inside of they model human anatomy, like a human skull, or make like the inside of a human, or they can model different other computer images that obviously it would be used for that. However, the Pixar imaging computer itself was used to create one Pixar movie or Pixar short film. However, but the thing is when they spun off the Lucasfilm division and became Pixar, the company Pixar, it was a company that at the time, it wasn't an animation studio. It basically was a studio it sold computers. It was just it was a computer software or a computer hardware and software company. And one of their main driving points was trying to sell the Pixar imaging computer to people that would want to use computer imaging. And they kept John Lasseter and a lot of the Lucasfilm graphics design, Lucasfilm I think graphics design project people on, and they were this little speck of the company that their entire jobs was to make short films, and they didn't make any money making the short films. They literally were just the short films made by Pixar in the early days. In this instance, we're going to watch 4 more before their last one, before Toy Story. It was in between 1986 and 1989, and basically what the short films they were a way to advertise, like, hey, you can make these wonderful animations using our computers and whatnot. However, they didn't release them theatrically. They were just kind of released in fact they were all released at a computer graphics convention called SIGGRAPH, in which they would basically show off their their designs to the people watching there. So we're gonna watch what is now officially considered the first Pixar short film. It is It is a movie called Luxo Jr. And for those of you that, if you don't know what this movie is, basically just know that this movie is the reason why Pixar has the hopping lamps in their logo at the beginning and end of every movie. So I'm going to start it up here. And even, it's kind of funny. So when they first released it, they had the logo, the Pixar company logo was actually basically the side of the Pixar imaging computer, because it was a square with like a big kind of circle in the middle of it. But then as they re-released the movie, they actually would put the new Pixar logo, which was the hopping lamp, in it, and they put a little title card as like, in 1986, Pixar Animation Studios created their first film. And this is why we have a hopping lamp in their logo. And it's basically, you get a big lamp that gets the famous, yellow and blue striped ball with the little red star in it. And they're kind of just, hitting it back and forth between him and apparently what is either his or her son. I mean, of course, they never really know why. You never know what gender the parent lamp is. Now, the interesting thing about this movie is that it while again really simple, it showcased a lot of great, a lot of great, advancements in computer animation. First off, as you can see, the lamps themselves are light sources, and they create shadows on themselves. And and that's a very difficult thing for computers to do. So they had to create an algorithm to, for to see like how the lamps would cast the shadows and whatnot. They also had another algorithm. They had to put another computer system in to get the rolling of the ball correct, because you see the ball, it's kind of rolling back and forth in the shot here, and as John Lasseter said, it was really hard to get the ball rolling properly. And then one thing here that you see the lamp as he's hopping out into kind of off the screen there, and you can kind of see the ripples in the cord, and that apparently had to be all done, by hand, which apparently John Lasseter said was pretty difficult. But when it first was released, it was a very big hit with computer graphics engineers and computer graphics people, and it actually was the first computer animated film to be nominated for an Academy Award. It was nominated for the 1986 Academy Award for Best Short Film. But best animated short film, I might add. It didn't win, unfortunately. But and even as you can see in the movie there, I mean, it's a very simple, very simply designed movie. I mean, it's literally just a black background with a wood kind of floor, and you get these lamps that are just kind of hopping up and down, hopping, and it's very simply designed. However, I mean, one of the things that people see it as a landmark in the history of computer animation, because at least in terms of computer animation, nobody had taken literally what are just inanimate objects and kind of given them life and character. And that's ultimately what, especially in the early days of Pixar, John Lasseter was really good at, giving them kind of that Disney animator's edge, that, could bring these inanimate objects to life. And so we're even gonna see that in the next movie here. This is a movie called Red's Dream. This one's not as well known as some of the earlier Pixar movies. I'm pretty sure a lot of you have heard of Luxo Jr. and a lot of you have heard of, the next couple of movies, Tin Toy and Knick Knack. But Red's, because these early Pixar films were actually re-released with the early Disney, with the early movies and whatnot. I mean, you had Red's Dream that got Luxo Jr. was released with Toy Story 2. Tin Toy was later re-released with Toy Story, and then Knick Knack was later re-released with I believe Finding Nemo, actually. But here we're gonna watch Red's Dream. Again, a very short movie, only about 4 minutes. These movies are, again, not very long. To the title, short film. Again, you see the Pixar the old Pixar logo. It's basically like a gray square with a kind of a circle in the middle of it. Now the thing is this one's this you can tell at least by the early parts of this movie that this movie is it's a lot more complex than Luxo Jr. You can see you have like you first off you even have like camera movements. There's like cameras tilting up and down. You see like these animated animated like night shots. Like you see like these cities. You see the rain coming down. You see some of the first attempts at computer generated water, which again at the time was extremely difficult. And so we're brought into a bike shop where, and we go over to what's called the clearance corner, and there's this lone little unicycle, and we pan up over to the unicycle. We pan over to the unicycle. We pan into, I'm pretty sure what's his mind. However, I'm pretty sure they literally just panned they zoomed into the seat there, which I guess the seat is his brain, I guess. And now we are watching a clown juggling different colored, bouncy balls. The interesting thing about this clown is that it was actually the first like humanoid-looking character that Pixar had attempted to create. Now, one thing that we'll talk about in the next couple of movies is that human characters, especially in computer animation, were extremely hard to make, actually. For a lot of people that have ever seen Toy Story, that's honestly why they, didn't really show a whole lot of Andy and his mom, is just because and remember, this is almost 8 years before Toy Story was even released. It was, creating humans was extremely difficult in the computer, and that's because you see a lot of the computers is that they kind of, when they kind of render their images, they the images tend to look a little plasticky and look obviously artificial. And now with the advancements of computer animation, I mean obviously we get computer animated images that look like honestly like real life photographs. But back in the day, I mean, you just look at a lot of these images and I mean you can tell that there's a plasticky kind of artificially shiny kind of look to the images that they just don't look very realistic, honestly. So it's basically like it's basically just Red's dream. The unicycle is named Red, and basically it's his dream to be like a unicycle for a clown at a in a circus, but he's basically just kind of stuck at a bike shop over in the clearance corner. He's actually marketed as 50% off, which is kind of sad. One of the things interesting about this is that the bike shop is they show it named Eben's Bikes, which is actually it was named after one of the technical directors of Pixar, a guy by the name of Eben Osby, which you can see his name very you can see his name very, very prominent in these credits here. One of the very interesting things about this film in particular is that I just read the very special thanks to everybody at Pixar for their support, patience, and suffering. But one of the very interesting things about Red's Dream is that it's the only Pixar film that was actually created using the Pixar imaging computer. And they realized that it really wasn't good for use for these kind of computer animated movies. Because honestly, if you look at the clown, one of the things that's really interesting that I always looked at was his neck doesn't connect to the rest of his body. I mean, there's like a definite like computer-esque image way that his image is created. I mean, you could tell that it was created on a computer, and because like the top part of his head is almost like floating on his head because the neck doesn't really connect to his body. So we finished Red's Dream up, and now we're going into Tin Toy, which is probably the biggest leap for Pixar. It's one of the I would say probably a big landmark. Probably even, I don't know, I wouldn't say bigger than Luxo Jr., but a landmark short film in a lot of senses. So Tin Toy was released in 1988 actually, and for those of you that but Tin Toy, basically the story is that you get this Tin Toy named Tinny, who's basically like a one-man band. Like, he's got like all these instruments around him and whatnot. And then he's chased around by this baby. Kind of interesting. The inspiration from this actually came from, I believe it was John Lasseter was watching he was watching videos of like his nephew or like one of his baby like nephews or nieces, and he saw that they were just kept putting all their toys into their mouth. And one of the things that John Lasseter he stated was that what would it be like to be a toy in this situation, and that's ultimately where the idea for Tin Toy came about. And it's currently buffering here. I'm watching all these on the Disney Plus streaming app, by the way. These are all these short films that I've been talking about. Andre and Wally B, Luxo Jr., Tin Toy, Red's Dream, and then the last one I'm about to start up here, Knick Knack. They're all available on the Disney Plus streaming service, as well as if you look up the Pixar short films. Volume 1, which honestly I think should have been released almost 10 years ago. It's been a while, but they're all available on that as well, which I highly do recommend watching these if you are a Pixar fan. A couple interesting things about Red's Dream that, at least in terms of Pixar, that at least I found very interesting is that so Pixar, again, during this entire time, was creating their own animation software, but they also had to create software to render the images. And rendering a computer image is basically making the image look as like a real life image. Because as you build the image in the computer, it's there's all these like different factors you have to add like coloring, shading, motion blur, and all the different the gloss, like the shine and the gloss, and like the wood paneling on the floor here. All that is added when they add them kind of like in parts when they're making the film, and then finally when they render it, it takes all those aspects and puts it into one single image, and it creates like a real life looking image. And basically when they finally render all the images out, they kind of literally just edit them together and edit all the frames together, and that basically creates the the illusion that it's at least in some kind of sense real and whatnot. But so they had to render all these images, and they actually had a software designed to render it, which is I believe it's they still use it even to this day. It's a software called RenderMan, which actually for a while became kind of the industry standard for rendering computer images. And then they also designed their own animation software called Marionette, which they used in a Mimvy Marionette, which they actually used, and they used this animation software to animate their later movies, such as Toy Story, such as A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2, Monsters Incorporated. And I mean, this is a lot of firsts in terms of Pixar. They use a lot of the animation styles and a lot of the techniques that they used in this movie. They would use in later films to create their first, animation, their first couple feature-length animation films. And also, I think as a lot of you have already kind of pointed out or may have seen the connection to, you see the connection of toys. I think most importantly for Pixar, you see the connection of toys being alive, and toys, inanimate objects being alive, as we even saw in Luxo Jr. And that's because Toy Story originally was designed to be a 30-minute kind of a Christmas special based on Tin Toy. Originally, Tinny the Tin Toy was actually going to be so originally it was going to be Tinny the Tin Toy and a ventriloquist dummy, but Tinny the Tin Toy turned into Buzz Lightyear, and the ventriloquist dummy turned into Woody the Cowboy Doll. And so I think that's the most important thing, honestly, is that Tin Toy kind of was the ultimate inspiration for Toy Story, which was obviously one of the a groundbreaking film in not only Pixar but in the cinema as well. And it also was groundbreaking in that this was the first computer animation film that won an Academy Award. It won the 1988 Academy Award for Best Short Film. So Tin Toy was obviously a very big accomplishment in the Pixar catalog, as I say here. And so after that, we're coming around to the later half of 1988, coming up to 1989, and so the people at Pixar, they decided that they kind of want John Lasseter even stated in a documentary that they kind of wanted a little bit of a break from like, because Tin Toy, it's a very complex movie. It was 5 minutes, the longest film they had made up until this point. It had some of the, if you take a look at a lot of really tricky camera tracking shots, which are really difficult for computer animation. You had the baby, which was extremely difficult to model and to animate. And then not only that, I mean, it was, the sets were probably, well, I wouldn't say maybe not as complex as Red's Dream, but very complex shots, very complex, especially with the, animating Tinny the Tin Toy, who's very, all those little components back there were you had to animate every single one of those. So it was a very difficult film for them to make. So they stated that one of the inspirations for their next film called Knick Knack, was they wanted to create just like a simple kind of cartoony, Chuck Jones kind of cartoony, just short film. And this was the last film created by Pixar, short film created by Pixar before they made Toy Story. This film was released in 1989, and about 2 years after this, they got the green light from Disney that they were going to make Toy Story. So it's very important film. Another thing with this one that, and they don't stay at it as much, at least the guys at Pixar, but what the thing is, a lot of this movie, you see a lot of these, obviously what they're called knickknacks. They're basically these kind of shelf ornaments, and you can see them moving as well. I mean, the ideas of inanimate objects being what quote unquote alive and is very prevalent in a lot of the early Pixar movies, which is why it's pretty, it's honestly fitting that their first movie was a movie about talking toys. So Knick Knack, again, from what I remember, reading, and from what I remember, watching documentaries of it, there wasn't a whole lot of ground broke during this movie. It was a very simple, at least compared to Tin Toy, what they made earlier. It's a very simple movie. I believe, honestly, I think probably the more difficult parts here is you see basically you have the little snowman in the we're basically focused on there's a snowman in a glass in a snow globe, and he's trying to escape the snow globe to go hang out with a very nice looking mermaid sitting kind of at a pool there. And basically the entire time it's him just trying to use a jackhammer to use a hammer to like hammer out of it. He's using all these explosives, using all this like different. He's got like a whole bunch of TNT here to try and get it up. Being obviously very he's obviously very just very cartoony-ish, very kind of slapsticky, Wile E. Coyote kind of Roadrunner kind of cartoons and whatnot. Which is why I really like this movie. But you can even see like the snow. I mean, if for those of you that obviously know snow globes, if you shake it around and whatnot, I mean, you get all those little snow particles kind of floating in there, and I could imagine that being fairly difficult. Honestly, I mean that looked. I mean, especially for the computers at the time, which they had been really working to improve it. But I mean, I could imagine how those little snowflakes, and now they have all these different colored rocks, and he's landed in a fishbowl, and these different colored rocks. I can imagine all those kind of floating around, how those could be somewhat difficult in order to animate and whatnot. Now the snowman, he got dropped into a fishbowl, and he saw another very nice looking mermaid in the fishbowl there, and then unfortunately his snow globe landed in the fishbowl and trapped him back inside, and it ended with the whole kind of circle and closing over him and whatnot, and it just kind of closed over him. Very interesting thing actually is that all the music created for Knick Knack was created by Bobby McFerrin, which I'm pretty sure a lot of you know him. The "Don't Worry, Be Happy," the guy that sung the "Don't Worry, Be Happy" song. But yeah, no. So that was the last. And actually, no. Back on Bobby McFerrin, he I think did the score for the film for free, because apparently, according to what I've read, he thought it would be cool or something like that. And a very famous instance of the Knick Knack score is that during the end credits, you can hear like him saying blah 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 blah, and it's like going blah 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 blah, and that's obviously one of my favorite parts of the score. But one of the really interesting things about it, one of the kind of a little behind the scenes thing with the end credits of that little score that Bobby's doing there is that he's literally on the script when he was kind of singing the score there, the script that he was given, or like the pages that he was given, it didn't have, I think it was all improvising there, and it literally just had blah 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 written on there. So he literally would sing out blah 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 blah, and ultimately that's how it was create. That's how that ending famous kind of scene was created there actually. So yeah, Pixar. So that was the last Pixar create animated short film before they decided to decided they went into production on Toy Story. As you can see, you can really see the evolution of the computer animation from Andre and Wally B to from Luxo Jr. to a big leap in Red's Dream to an even bigger leap in Tin Toy. But and then Knick Knack, you can kind of see a little bit of a not a decline, but they didn't really push the envelope as they had been doing with the previous movies. However, at the same time, they still made a movie that's very entertaining. I'd say probably one of the funniest of the early Pixar films, actually. And then afterwards, literally the entire company, they decided to. I believe they had 2 years in between when they made this movie and when they were greenlit to make Toy Story, and in between that time they were making they were making commercials. Like I remember they were showing these little commercials for like these Lifesaver gummies and for these spearmint gum commercials that they were creating, and again they were just trying to hone in their computer animation skills. And then finally Disney at the time came to them and was like, hey, do you guys want to make a feature-length movie? Or they were originally, again, Pixar was wanting to make a 30-minute Christmas special based on Tin Toy. And then ultimately Disney decided, you know what, you guys can Disney ultimately kind of pushed them into making the feature-length movie. And then as they developed it, it later, eventually, the 30-minute Christmas special based on Tin Toy turned into Toy Story. And the rest is what they say is history. So that is basically it for this episode of the Movie Commentary Podcast. I will I will be doing a lot more commentaries based on, especially some of the earlier films based on Pixar, because a lot of the behind the scenes stories that I've done a lot, I've read a lot, watched a lot of the commentaries. A lot of the earlier behind the scenes stories of the early Pixar movies. Basically, I would say from the first Toy Story probably up until The Incredibles is very, very interesting stories there. Something that I'm really been very interested in for a long time, and something I'll be doing for a while. And plus, also, those are some really great movies. I mean, Toy Story 2, A Bug's Life. I mean, those are some great movies. I mean, a lot of those early Pixar movies are what I would consider probably some of my favorite, all-time favorite movies of my life. So yeah, no, that's it. This is where I'll sign off. Again, this will probably be a little bit of a shorter episode. Again, we're just watching the short films, not really watching a feature-length movie. Thank you all for watching, not for watching, but for listening. I actually don't record. I don't have a video of these podcasts, just me kind of doing audio and whatnot. But again, thank you so much for listening. And we will see you on the flip side.